post 2 times a week on Monday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I recommend using headphones if you would like to hear the gentle mic brushing. Now let's get right to tonight's case. This has been a highly requested one, and I actually wasn't gonna do it at first because I felt like it has been covered so many times and everyone knows the story. But since some new information has come out, I have decided to go ahead and cover it. So I'm going to start with the full case, and then I'm going to go on to the updates and my thoughts as usual. And I didn't even say what the case was yet, but you all know from the thumbnail, of course, and the title. So it is going to be the case of the Menendez brothers. And today we are going to be traveling to California. Shout out to all my friends in California. Please stick around at the end of the video for some extended mic brushing to help you relax. So, this case occurred in 1989. That was 35 years ago. And as I mentioned before, we are going to be talking about Eric and Lyle Menendez, the infamous Menendez brothers. And they have been the subject of countless TV shows, documentaries, dramatizations, movies, podcasts. They were featured on court TV for their whole trial, the first trial that is. There have been books. I mean, I wouldn't even try to name all these things for you, okay? There's just so many. But their case has received extra attention lately due to a brand new dramatization series that was released by Netflix called Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menendez story. And that was released in September of this year, 2024. And then in early October, Netflix also released a documentary on them. And in that documentary, the brothers themselves participated, and you hear them talking all about what went on. And did I watch these two things? Yes and no. I watched several episodes of Monsters, and it got to the point where it's like, I know everything, I know this story, and I'm bored, Not to be casual about a double murder, a date for that. It is November 26th, and I will tell you more about that later on, but let's go ahead and get started with some details. So just to let you know, currently Lyle Menendez is 56 and Eric Menendez is 53. He is turning 54 in November. Okay, so just so you know, that's their current ages, and they are both still incarcerated. Okay, so let's talk about their father, Jose Menendez. He was born on May 6th, 1944 in Havana, Cuba. When he was 16, at the beginning of the Cuban Revolution, he moved to the U.S. He attended Southern Illinois University on a full scholarship for swimming, and that is where he met Mary Louise, aka Kitty Anderson, as she was a little older than him. She was born on October 14th, 1941 in Oak Lawn, Cook County, Illinois. And when they met, she was a senior at the university and he was a freshman. But they fell in love, and right after Kitty got her degree, which was a BS in communications, they eloped, and that was 1963. And they moved to New York City, where Jose went to Queens College on a full athletic scholarship, and he earned a degree in accounting. And Kitty got work as an elementary school teacher. Their first son, Lyle, was born there in New York City on January 10th, 1968. Kitty quit her job as a teacher when he was born, and then they moved to New Jersey, where Eric was born on November 27th, 1970. They were living in Hopewell Township, New Jersey, and the boys attended a private school, Princeton Day School. Jose had become a highly successful executive at Hertz Corporation, and later he started working for RCA Records. When he was appointed as the CEO of Live Entertainment, they picked up and moved to Calabasas, California, which was a very wealthy area. In 1988, Lyle and Eric were involved in multiple burglaries in their neighborhood. Imagine that, rich boys involved in burglaries. Isn't that something? Anyway, after this happened, they moved to Beverly Hills, allegedly because Jose was ashamed of what his sons had done and he wanted to move. Now, Eric was very talented in tennis. He ranked 44th in the US when he was in 11th grade. Lyle was attending Princeton University until he was thrown out for plagiarism. Eric was accepted into UCLA for the fall of 1989, which he never actually got around to attending. And his father had reportedly told him that he could live on campus, in the dorms, but that he must sleep at home a couple of nights each week. On August 18th of 1989, Lyle and Eric was much easier to buy shotguns than it was to buy handguns. And they also bought several boxes of birdshot and buckshot ammunition at a Big Five sporting goods store in San Diego. Eric had used a stolen driver's license from Lyle's friend Donovan Goudreau to make the purchase. So, a couple days later, on August 20th, 1989, 45-year-old Jose and 47-year-old Kitty Menendez were sitting in their den watching TV in their Beverly Hills mansion. And 21-year-old Lyle and 18-year-old Eric entered the den carrying these brand new shotguns. Loaded shotguns. Jose was shot 6 times, including a fatal shot to the back of his head. Meanwhile, when they shot Kitty several times, she was still alive. She was trying desperately to crawl away from them, to get away, and save her own life. They ran out of bullets in these guns and they went outside to reload. Then they came back in to shoot her some more. She was shot, I believe, a total of 10 times, with the fatal shot being directly into her face. Now, after they killed their parents, they collected all of the spent shell casings and they went to the movies in an attempt to establish an alibi. After the movies, they came back to the house and they reported the crime to the police as if they had just, came home and found their parents like this. And the police did not treat the boys as if they were suspects at all. They did not test their hands for gunpowder residue. They didn't search their cars. And they heard that Jose had a lot of enemies. Since he was a wealthy executive, he was not well liked by his coworkers, supposedly. And it was believed that maybe this was a mob hit. So that's the direction that the police were originally going. The officers who worked on the crime scene said that it was, quote, the most brutal, end quote, one they had ever encountered. A retired police officer named Dan Stewart stated, quote, "I've seen a lot of homicides, but nothing quite that brutal. Blood, flesh, skulls. It would be hard to describe, especially Jose, as resembling a human that you would recognize. That's how bad it was," end quote. Now, as the months went on, a different picture started to emerge to the police. They saw the brothers going on spending sprees. Lyle bought a Buffalo Wing restaurant in Princeton, New Jersey. He also bought 3 Rolex watches and a Porsche Carrera. Eric hired a full-time tennis coach and competed in a series of tournaments overseas. The brothers moved out of the Beverly Hills mansion and they moved into adjoining condominiums in nearby Marina del Rey. They were seen dining extravagantly and going on lavish vacations to the Caribbean and London. Supposedly, they had spent about $700,000 collectively at the end of all that. So it didn't look like they were grieving children, but their family has said that that was kind of typical spending for them, so who knows, right? Eric's high school friend named Craig Signorelli reported to the police that Eric had confessed to him that he had killed his parents. He also told the police that he and Eric had previously written a 66-page screenplay for school. I think it was for school, or maybe it wasn't. And it was called Friends. And it depicted a son killing his wealthy parents for their inheritance. Coincidence? So the police had this guy wear a wire and try to get a confession, but he was not successful. And then Eric went and told his therapist what he and his brother had done. He was having a lot of trouble coping with the guilt. And so he thought he had doctor-patient confidentiality when he told Dr. Jerome Oziel about what he had done. And this guy later taped sessions with Eric and Lyle, having them discuss what they had done, both of them thinking that, this information would not ever be able to be shared to anyone, But this doctor told his mistress, he was married and he had a mistress, he told his mistress about what they had done and about the tapes. And when she got into a big fight with him, she went ahead and told the police all about it. So Lyle wound up getting arrested on March 8th, 1990. And 3 days later, Eric turned himself in after returning to Los Angeles from Israel. Both of them were held without bail and jailed separately at the Los Angeles County Jail. In August of 1990, so that's a full year after the murders, okay, so August of 1990, and they were arrested March of 1990, okay, so August 1990, Judge James Albrecht ruled that the tapes of the conversations that the doctor had made were admissible due to the fact that Oziel claimed that Lyle threatened him, thereby violating the doctor-patient privilege. So Lyle supposedly had threatened the doctor, and if you threaten your doctor, they no longer have to keep what you've said confidential because was described as an enabling, selfish, mentally unstable alcoholic and drug addict who encouraged her husband's behavior and was also violent towards them. Reportedly, she was well aware of the abuse, and she did absolutely nothing to stop it. So the brothers were claiming that their parents were going to kill them to prevent them from exposing this abuse. And that is why they felt the need to murder their parents. Now, this trial ended in a mistrial. Both juries were deadlocked. So a second trial began in 1995, and in this trial, the judge limited testimony about the sexual abuse claims, as he felt they were just claims, nothing more, There was no evidence that it was true. That's what the judge felt, Now, both brothers were eventually convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances for lying in wait, as well as conspiracy to murder. And in 1996, they were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The jury, after it was all over, they noted that the abuse defense was not a factor in their deliberations. So they did not even think about abuse when they decided, the outcome. But they decided not to impose the death penalty because both brothers had no prior criminal record or history of violence. The California Department of Corrections separated them and sent them to different prisons. Now, years and years and years later, on April 4th, 2018, Lyle was finally moved into the same housing unit as Eric, reuniting them for the first time since they began serving their sentences. Prior to that, they had only been able to communicate by letter. Now, although they didn't sleep in the same room, they were able to see each other during exercise, recreation, and meal times. They said that they had burst into tears and hugged each other when they first met in the housing unit. And this particular unit is reserved for inmates who agree to participate in education and rehabilitation programs without creating disruptions. And supposedly they've been pretty well behaved inmates. There have been a couple of things, but for the most part they've been on good behavior. In 2018, Lyle and Eric founded the Prison Reform and Beautification Initiative, the Green Space Project, which aims to make prisons more livable and rehabilitative by painting murals on the walls and planting trees. In June of this year, 2024, Lyle earned a bachelor's degree in sociology through the University of California, Irvine's Special College Program for Inmates of Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility, which is where they are housed. Now, thanks to their good behavior, like I mentioned before, and their efforts in prison jobs and classes, they live in a, quote, non-designated programming facility, end quote. And this unit is called Echo Yard. It offers inmates there more freedom and rehabilitative and educational programming. Echo Yard prisoners take yoga and art classes. They study various academic particular formal counts, Lyle and Eric live in different dorm rooms, and these cells are locked overnight beginning at 9 p.m. While in prison, Eric has worked with terminally ill inmates. He's become interested in meditation and has led classes about religion. In 2018, his aunt told reporters, quote, "Eric was really making sure that the prisoners knew that there is a God that loves us. That was marvelous to me because he never got that at home," end quote. Lyle served in inmate government for 15 years at Mule Creek State Prison, and he has worked on prison reform. Both brothers have offered support and guidance to inmates who experience childhood sexual abuse. Both of the brothers have been married while in prison, but neither of them have been allowed conjugal visits at all, ever, due to the crimes that they committed. Having murdered family members, it prohibits them from being allowed to have conjugal visits. Now, on April 18th of 2023, on a segment of the Today Show, a man named Roy Rossello, who was a former member of the boy band Menudo, he was discussing a new documentary that he was in involving the Menendez family. And he stated that when he was 14 years old, he was drugged and raped by Jose Menendez while he was visiting the Menendez home in New Jersey. So that gives some credence to, well, it gives a lot of credence to the claims of the brothers that Jose had molested them. This guy is saying, I was also molested by Jose. So, in May of 2023, the Menendez brothers requested a new hearing based on that allegation, because if you remember, in the second trial, there was limited testimony allowed on the abuse because there wasn't any evidence that it happened, right? So now there's some evidence. Someone else is saying it. So they requested a new hearing. And there was another piece of information that was also being brought to light at this, before this, in fact. And that was a newly discovered letter written by Eric to his cousin, Andy Kano. He wrote the letter in 1988, 9 months before the murder. And in the letter, he had written about the abuse, stating that it was, quote, still happening, end quote. So, on October 3rd of 2024, so very recently, the LA District Attorney George Gascon announced in a press conference that his office is actively reviewing the case. Quote, "We have been given a photocopy of a letter that allegedly was sent by one of the brothers to another family member talking about him being the victim of molestation," end quote. Now, in the first trial, the one that ended in a deadlock, this cousin, Kano, testified that Eric told him about his father's abuse at the age of 13. He didn't show a letter, he just spoke of it. Meanwhile, Kano died of a drug overdose in 2003. And an author who was going to be writing about this subject asked Kano's mother if he can look through her son's dresser that was filled with private papers, and that was in 2018. case shows that Jose Menendez was very much a violent and brutal man who would sexually abuse children, but it strongly suggests that, in fact, he was still abusing Eric Menendez as late as December 1988, just as the defense had argued all along, end quote. Now, going back to the allegation made by Roy Rossello from Menudo, and he is currently 54. He sweared in an affidavit that around 1983 or 84, Jose had drugged and raped him when he was a teenage member of the band Menudo. And Jose was a music executive at RCA at the time who had signed Menudo to a deal. So Rossello made these allegations public in a documentary on Peacock in 2023 called Menendez plus Menudo, Boys Betrayed. So in that documentary, Rossello pointed to a photo of Jose Menendez, and he stated, quote, "That's the man here that raped me. That's the pedophile. It's time for the world to know the truth," end quote. The Los Angeles DA has stated that he's, quote, "not leaning in any direction right now and is keeping an open mind. None of this new information has been confirmed. We are not at this point ready to say that we either believe or do not believe that information. We have people in the office that are looking at this very carefully, very experienced lawyers that are looking at this. That evidence will be presented to me. Their recommendations will be presented to me, but the final decision will be mine. Until we get there, we're not sure yet which direction this will go," end quote. So, DA Gascon is re-examining this case as part of a larger initiative to address what he calls, quote, "over-incarceration," end quote. Since 2021, he has resentenced more than 300 inmates under policies aimed at reducing what he has said were sentences, especially in cases where trauma or other mitigating factors were not fully considered by the court at the time, just as in the Menendez case. So he has been able to do this because the California Penal Code has changed over time. So now the code requires courts to consider factors like the defendant's age at the time of the crime, psychological trauma, evidence of rehabilitation in prison. So he can recommend re-examination of older sentences in cases where those factors were not considered. In the Menendez case, the abuse that they allegedly endured could be a key factor, especially since it was not fully weighed in their 1996 trial and sentencing. So their lawyer, Cliff Gardner, wrote the following in an email to the Associated Press, quote, "Given today's very different understanding of how sexual and physical abuse impacts children, both boys and girls, and the remarkable new evidence, we think resentencing is the appropriate result. The brothers have served more than 30 years in prison. That is enough," end quote. And you may have heard that several celebrities have had things to say lately. Murphy, the producer who created the Netflix series Monsters, about the Menendez brothers, he believes that they will be home for the holidays this year. He said that the series, quote, gave them their moment in the court of public opinion. I think they can be out of prison by Christmas. I really believe that, end quote. Rosie O'Donnell, who has been a friend of Lyle Menendez for years, said that she feels they will be released, quote, sooner than later, end quote. And reality star Kim Kardashian recently met the brothers in prison, and she wrote an essay for NBC News in which she said that the brothers were, quote, denied a fair second trial, and that the exclusion of crucial abuse evidence denied Eric and Lyle the opportunity to fully present their case, further undermining the fairness of their conviction. We owe it to those little boys who lost their childhoods, who never had a chance to be heard, helped, or saved, end quote. So the hearing will be on November 26th of 2024, and there are basically three possible outcomes. One is that they will have their life sentences vacated, which means they would be immediately released from prison. Or they could be resentenced with the possibility of parole or given a release date. Or they could just be given a new trial with the new evidence admitted in court. And that is the case. What are your thoughts? I will share some of mine. So I will start by saying rest in peace to Jose and Kitty Menendez, and my heart goes out to their families and friends who grieved this shocking and traumatic loss. Now, what are my thoughts about the motive? Was it just two very greedy, spoiled, rich boys who killed their parents simply so they can get their hands on the money immediately? All the money? Was that it? I mean, who can get it out of their minds? Who saw this recent dramatization, Monsters show? You see these rich boys speeding around in their fancy cars, buying all this expensive stuff without a care in the world. And in the background you hear this Milli Vanilli music, which, by the way, Milli Vanilli is getting a renewed interest, if you've heard of them. The band. One of them is no longer living, but I'm not going to go into their whole story. If you know, you know, but all of a sudden they are getting a lot of attention. People are playing their songs a lot because of this documentary. But anyway, so if you've seen it, you can picture this big spending spree, fancy cars, fancy watches, all this stuff. It doesn't look very sympathetic. No, but that's just a dramatization. And do I think that that is really what happened? Not really. I mean, they definitely deserved to be found guilty of first-degree murder. It was premeditated. I don't believe it was self-defense. I don't really think they feared for their lives. I mean, I do believe that they were abused horrifically. I believe that. And everyone can believe whatever they want, you know. It's fine. We can all have This is just what I think. Doesn't mean it's true. It's just what I think. But so yeah, I do think they had gone through a ton of abuse, which of course messed up their minds in a huge way. But I do think they were 18 and 21. They could have left, you know. I'm not saying, like, nobody should come to me and say, you know, it's like the battered woman syndrome, you can't leave. I don't see it like that, okay, in this situation. They could have left behind all the riches and just gone and left their family entirely to get away from it. I feel that was a valid option, but who wants to give up all that wealth when you've grown up like that? How do you just walk away penniless, right? So they killed their parents. They hated their parents for what their parents had done, understandably, right? I mean, I did hear an interview recently, like maybe a year or so ago, where Kitty's sister, you know, Kitty Menendez, the mother, her sister spoke and said that everyone in the family was aware of what was happening to the boys whenever the boys were alone with their father in the house. Nobody was allowed to go on the same floor that they were on. You know, so if Jose was with one of his boys on the second floor, everyone had to stay on the first floor. And Kitty's sister said she does not forgive Kitty for allowing her husband to do this to the boys. She did say that Jose was a monster, an absolute monster. And so I believe that Jose was a monster, but it still doesn't make it okay to kill monsters, right? Like, that's not how the legal system works in this country. So do I think the motive was just greed? No, not entirely. I think that it was hatred of the man for what he had done to them. I feel like that was the big part. The extreme hatred, which is understandable. But it's not understandable to kill people. Like, you just can't do that, obviously. So I think it was right for them to go to prison for a long time. But I do believe that they have paid their dues to society at this point. I feel like they are changed people. They're not a danger to society, and letting them out will not give the message that you can kill your parents and get away with it. They didn't get away with it. They've been in prison since 1990. So I am hoping that on November 26th, the decision is made to release them, that they've served enough time, and to just let them out. So that's about all I have for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found it to be thought-provoking. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and I hope you have a wonderful day or night.